Hi everyone, I'm Natalie and welcome back to my channel. Today I will be showing you how to make the Noel Scalloped Christmas tree skirt. This pattern is perfect to decorate your house with at Christmas time or gift to family and friends. It's a great beginner pattern and is backwater friendly. The tree skirt is made up of 12 scalloped panels which can easily be cut from fat quarters. I would just recommend choosing a fabric with a non-directional pattern. This will ensure you can get 2 panels out of 1 fat quarter. Don't forget to grab the pattern now so you can sew along with me. The link to my Etsy shop is in the description below. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future tutorials or sewing patterns. Let's get sewing! We're going to start our tree skirt project by cutting out our 12 pattern pieces from the pattern. We're then going to mark out the quilting lines on each pattern piece. I laid mine out in a circle first as I was using 3 alternate colours just so I could see what order I wanted them all in. We're then going to cut out our batting or wadding. I cut mine a little bit bigger than the pattern piece just to give myself some leeway when I was quilting. Now we're going to quilt all 12 of our tree panels, so put your batting or wadding down and then put your main piece over the top so the right side is facing up. You should also have the quilt lines drawn on with either a heat erasable marker or some chalk. You could pop a few pins through these layers or use a quilting adhesive spray to keep everything in place, but I just went through and quilted all my layers together. This is when it comes in handy to have a slightly larger wadding or batting piece, just so that if anything slides about you still quilt it all. This is how one of the panels should look after you've done your 3 quilting lines. We're then just going to trim any excess batting or wadding off the sides. We want our edges to be nice and neat so that when we sew them together later it will be easy for us. Once you're done with that first panel, you're then going to repeat that process for all of the 11 more panels we have to do. So that would be 12 panels in total. So once you have quilted and trimmed all of your pieces, we're then going to start putting the sides together. So here you can see I'm putting the right sides together on the pieces that I want to go next to each other. I just put a few pins in to make sure everything is aligned and sitting nice and flat. Now we're going to sew down that side with a 1 cm seam allowance. Just make sure that your wadding or batting isn't getting caught up in the foot of the sewing machine. To prevent this happening, just try and keep everything as smooth and flat as possible. This is how your sides should look once you open that up, all nice and neat. Now we're going to continue that same process by pinning another side, right side together. Just make sure everything is nicely aligned again. Sew down that seam with a 1 cm seam allowance. This is how it should look at this point with your seams sewn together. As you can see, I sewed mine together in sections of 3. This is because I had a repeating pattern using 3 different fabrics and I wanted to make sure I didn't mess up the order of them. I think that doing it in sections of 3 also makes it more manageable when sewing it together on the sewing machine. Once I had my 4 sections of 3, I just laid it out on the floor so I could see it all together, and then I decided which side I wanted to have my opening down, and this was going to be the side that I didn't sew together. So I sewed the rest of my side seams, leaving that one side open, which you can see here. This is going to be where we sew our ribbons on later so that we can tie it around the tree. Moving on to our next stage, we're going to do the lining, so make sure you cut out 12 lining pieces in your lining fabric. We're going to go through the same process again as we did with our main fabric by laying our pieces right sides together, pinning them together and then sewing 1 cm seam allowance down that side seam. This is how that seam should look once you have finished sewing it. And now we're just repeating that process by pinning everything right sides together and sewing down our 1 cm seam allowance for all of those 12 lining pieces. Once you've sewn those all together, this is how it should look. Don't forget to leave the gap for the opening. Now we're going to prep our lining to sew onto our main fabric by pressing all of our seams nice and flat so everything lays on top of each other really nicely. To lay the seams flat, I just like to wiggle them open from the wrong side, press those down first, and then flip everything over to the right side and give it a final press. We're then going to do the same for our main layer. Again, just open up that seam from the wrong side, give it a press and then flip it over to the right side and press everything nice and flat. Just be careful if you're using synthetic wadding like I am that you don't melt your wadding. This will reduce the puffiness of the wadding and the quilting. I like to just turn the heat down a little bit and just make sure I really focus on just the seams so I don't flatten anything. Now that we've given everything a good press, we're going to lay our lining on top of our main layer by putting everything right sides together and then just line up our openings. Make sure you line all the curves up nicely and everything lays nice and flat. Now we're going to pin everything together. I like to start pinning from our opening edge to make sure those are nice and aligned, and then I like to pin the seams where they meet. To match the seams as best as possible, I like to put the pin right through the middle of the seam and line it up with the main fabric underneath so that everything is aligned nicely. Continue to pin your edges the whole way round, and then this is what it should look like once you have finished pinning everything. We're then going to sew around this whole perimeter, the circle in the middle, but we're going to leave a gap in one of the openings, just there, for when we want to fold everything through to the right side. So now we're just sewing around the whole perimeter, making sure we pivot when we get to the seams at the scalloped edges so that we can have nice crisp points. Also, I didn't manage to capture it on camera, but we are going to sew around the central circle. As you come back round to the beginning of where you started sewing, just remember to leave a gap so that we can fold everything through. This is how everything should look once you have finished sewing around the perimeter with the gap in the middle, and then also you can see here how I sewed around the central circle. And this is how those inside corners of the scallops should look as well. We're going to take a pair of scissors and we're going to snip into the seam allowance and trim off any of the seam allowance corners, just so that everything is nice and smooth when we fold it through to the right side. Just make sure you don't snip through your actual stitches. So do the same for the curved scalloped edges, and then we're also going to cut into those corner points and just trim off any excess seam allowance so that when we turn those through they're going to be nice crisp points. To fold everything through to the right side, just pop your hand through the opening that we've made. If you're finding it's a bit small, you can just unpick it a little bit and it'll be fine. So put your hand through, grab everything from the other end and start to gently pull it through. So once I've pulled it through, I then just go around making sure all of my curved edges are nice and neat, and then I sometimes use a little skewer just to point out any of the corners. You don't have to use a skewer, you could use something like a pencil or a chopstick instead. Once everything is folded through, we're then just going to give it a nice press at the iron to make sure everything is nice and neat, and then we're going to pin up our hole that we left so we could fold everything through, and then once that's pinned we're going to sew around the perimeter. To finish everything off neatly, I like to top stitch around the whole perimeter just using 0.5 centimeters or the edge of my sewing foot. I sew around all of the scalloped edges, just making sure that everything is nice and flat, and then when I get to where the seams meet in the middle between colours, I pivot my machine foot and then go back round the other circle. So this is what your top stitching should look like when you have finished doing that. I then give everything one final press before we move on to sewing the ribbons. So this is how the main body of the tree skirt should look. You should have everything quilted, side seams sewn together, the lining attached, and then top stitched round the perimeter. So to sew our ribbons, I just use the same colour as my lining, and then I'm going to cut out 12 of the ribbon pieces from our pattern. And now we're going to fold them in half and sew down 1 centimetre seam allowance. So I start at the folded short edge and then I pivot when I get to the corner and continue to sew down the rest of the length of the ribbon piece. Then I trim the corners of my seam allowance at a 45-degree angle so that when we fold them through they will be nice and sharp corners. So to fold everything through, I take that top edge and I just take the blunt end of a skewer and push everything through. You could use a chopstick instead. So once you've done this step, you're then going to repeat it for the rest of the ribbons. and then we're going to press our ribbon pieces nice and flat. So now it's time for the last step, attaching our ribbons to the main tree skirt. So just fold the raw edge under and then pin your ribbon pieces in place. And I like to just spend a little bit of time making sure that everything aligns properly so that when you tie your ribbons together they will match nicely. So once you're happy with the placement of all your ribbons, we're then going to top stitch them on. So I like to just go around the edge as close as possible and top stitch a nice neat little square. I also just stitched a diagonal line through the centre of that square so that everything was nice and secure and would last for years. Repeat this step for all your ribbons and then tie up nicely into little bows and you're done. Thank you so much for sewing along with me. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope your tree skirt gives you some festive joy at this time of year. If you enjoyed this tutorial, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe and hit the bell button so that you get notified of any future sewing tutorials. Let me know in the comments if you decide to make the tree skirt yourself and what your next festive make will be. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.